Welcome back to Market Shares. Well, today we're welcoming a special guest, NBC data and business correspondent and Citrus TV alum, Brian Cheung. Brian, it's great to have you.
Hey Ben, what's up? It's great to be back on Citrus TV.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to start off here because you're a Fed guy. You started at the Fed. You spent some time there. You always hear that the Fed is kind of the bank's bank, but I want to ask how this decision at the Fed to cut rates is going to affect us. I mean, student loans, credit cards, mortgage rates, maybe not now, but in the near future.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I could kind of put my Fed hat back on, because as you mentioned, my first job was as an analyst over there. They're really the stewards of this economy. They want the unemployment rate to remain low, and they also want to make sure that inflation doesn't get too high. So this is kind of the balancing act that they do. And when we talk about the current economic moment that we're in this really strange position where inflation is going up. The last 3 months or so of data, when you take a look at the consumer price index, has showed the rate of inflation rising in part, not entirely, but due in part to the tariffs from this administration, which have kind of begun to bite into the data. But we've also seen as inflation's rising, the overall jobs picture has kind of deteriorated. So as we know, there was like a pace of over 100,000 job gains per month at the beginning of this year. But since the summer, that's really slowed down. And in fact, the numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics show that in June, we actually saw a contraction in the amount of jobs added in a given month. We actually lost jobs. And so for that reason, the Fed might look at the contraction in the jobs market and say, whoa, we really got to lower interest rates here. But when they look at the inflation picture, what happens when you lower interest rates? It actually risks making inflation worse.
I want to give some context here because all this is happening with the September 30th deadline for this government shutdown and funding continuing resolution. We saw one of these happen in 2018. What things are going to be different this time around, especially with changes at the Fed? But what can people expect if the government does shut down after this deadline?
Well, look, I mean, the government shutdown is something that happens, it feels like every 6 to 8 months these days. And I think that's a reason why you have markets that are kind of numb to the whole headline. Markets have been crushing all-time highs seemingly on a repeatedly basis. And that is coming, as you mentioned, not just despite those tariff headlines, but as this government shutdown is looming and very real. I mean, we are about a week and a half away from the US government shutting down. You've seen a lot of volatility in the bond markets. And I think that that is going to be the bigger story because the equities market seems to have gotten some sort of numbing injection where it seems like they're optimistic about being able to avoid the worst outcomes on tariffs, and they also seem to be betting that we won't have a shutdown.
I want to ask because I know in the economic world typically they're not betting folk, but if you had to put odds on this government shutdown from what we're seeing coming out of the Fed and the executive branch, what would you say those odds are?
Well, I'm not a betting man, so I don't, and I also don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know. But I mean, again, historically, we have seen government shutdowns avoided at the final minute. I mean, this is kind of a interesting situation. I mean, we recall the last government shutdown was narrowly avoided because Chuck Schumer, Democratic minority leader, kind of came in to throw the GOP a bone. Is that going to happen again, given that he faced so much political backlash? I mean, I'm not a Capitol Hill reporter, but you would imagine that that would be a little harder. It's a harder scenario to imagine this time around. So can Speaker Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune get this across the finish line? We will have to see. But again, there's a week and a half or so to kind of get this resolved. And as we know in Congress, they're not gonna get that done tomorrow or the day after. If it does happen, it's gonna be midnight going into October 1st. But I think that if you do see a surprise shutdown, that's something that's gonna throw markets for a loop because they're kind of not pricing that in, which is a bet in and of itself.
And we've seen a lot of changes here in central New York, nationally with immigration raids, internationally at the Hyundai plant the other day. Are these having a physical manifestation in the labor market, in the jobs market for these companies? Do you think they're going to run into issues in the future with employment when it comes to immigration?
Well, we have not seen that yet. First off, it's just simply too early to say so. When you talk about the Hyundai plant raid in Georgia, that was only a few weeks ago. But yes, that is having massive ripple effects across the business community. I mean, I'll tell you, Ben, that I talked to a number of CEOs in my day job, and I've been hearing that companies are looking at what happened in Hyundai, where ICE came in and just rounded up hundreds of South Korean workers and sent them home, essentially. And if you are a foreign company that wants to genuinely build in the United States, and you're a foreign company that would need to bring over some of your people to stand up the plant and just make sure that everything looks up to standard for your company code, you're worried about that. And you might be thinking twice even about making those investments.
Can these Mag 7 companies, fill these jobs with American workers if these visas aren't available? Do you think they're going to balance this out and say, hey, it's cheaper for us to pay the fee or it's cheaper for us to find new labor?
Yeah, well, and that's a really important point that you bring up here, because the Trump administration's kind of rationale for this fee is to try to incentivize companies to hire domestically. Companies are going to face that exact equation here, which is, okay, if it is the case that we're going to have to pay $100,000 to bring over talent, should we just pay that because we can't find it here? Or should we try to recruit local U.S. talent? And I think a lot of these companies will tell you, look, if we could have hired a local U.S. talent, we would have done so. The reason why we are doing the H-1B is because we cannot find them. But I want to point out one important thing, which is that the Trump administration has framed the use, really abuse is how they described it, of the H-1B visa system as a way for companies to pay foreigners less money than they could if they hired someone American with the same exact skills. But the H-1B system actually requires companies to report to the U.S. government that they are paying the same wages to international talent as they are domestically. So if you're a tech company, again, those ones that I mentioned that are the biggest users of this, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, Apple, you are going, wait. These are the employees that have been kind of, helping us develop all of this artificial intelligence technology that we need to try to beat China. This could rejigger the whole space race on artificial intelligence, given that we're talking about not just these massive companies that are really betting on AI and American AI, but they're also some of the biggest weighted cap stocks in the stock market. So we're talking about the kind of big stock market at large here. But nonetheless, immigration is such a big story when it comes to the overall economy and both inflation and the jobs market that it absolutely could have ripple effects. So that's something that I'll be watching. I'm sure you will too.
Yeah, definitely watching closely this next week here. So, well, thank you so much for joining us, Brian. It was great having you.
Great to have you too, man.
Awesome. Well, market shares will be back after this quick break.